Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, February 13th, one day before Valentine's Day. So make sure you go out and buy those chocolates a day early so you don't get in trouble because you know how tomorrow will be. Anyways, we have Secretary of Agency of Natural Resources, Julie Moore, and Megan Kleinfelter, Business Director, Agency of Natural Resources. We're going to spend some sections on 9 and 10 and probably a few other little areas before we're all said and done. As I have been known to do on Tuesday, no matter who's in the room, I'd just like to introduce ourselves, to start the week off, so we'll start right over here.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. Wendy Harrison, Senator from Wyndham County, Wyndham District.
Irene Runners in the North, which includes Fairfax.
Brian Caldwell, the Rutland District.
Linda Lima, Committee Assistant.
Yes, Senator Russing, Essex District, and good afternoon, Commissioner. Again, thank you very much for coming in, our Secretary, excuse me. I'm sorry for the downgrade. I apologize very much. So, thanks for coming in. This is, one of the sections, both of these sections right here were something that we hadn't gone through yet. We've, trying to make hide and tail of, the capital bill, and I don't think there's a lot of confusion in here, but it's always just nice to have you folks come in and tell us about it.
Of course, happy to. Just getting my. No, it's not. PowerPoint is trying to contact the server. All right, here we go. Let me share my screen.
And were you gonna let somebody in, Linda?
There in.
Okay,
Yeah, Megan, if you want to, look, we're gonna show the slides.
okay, that's good. I didn't see her up there. Okay, there's.
So good afternoon. For the record, I'm Julie Moore, Secretary of Natural Resources, and I'm joined by Meg Kleinfelder, who is our Chief Financial Officer. And just was gonna walk you quickly through the budget adjustment related to the capital bill, which in this instance includes our proposal for allocating the clean water set aside in the biennial capital bill you all passed last year. So there are two different sections that relate to the Agency of Natural Resources. Section 9 is the investments in our agency-owned infrastructure, largely within parks and fishing access areas. Section 10 is clean water. This includes allocations that go to the Agency of Agriculture and VHCB in addition to ANR, and I'll talk about all of them. And then we did have one proposed technical correction that I believe was submitted by the Agency of Administration and language surrounding the capital bill that I just wanted to flag for you all. So we're not proposing any changes within section 9 of the FY25 portion of the ANR capital bill. Those line items are unchanged from last year. I know sometimes we come in with refinements around the drinking water and clean water state revolving fund matches. But given that there's no federal budget, we are not in a position to make any changes or refinement to those numbers currently.
Do you want questions as we go along? Or
Well, I just want to ask one. So the money, the match money that's holding to that drink clean water and all that, that's in section B, or is that in sub account B with appropriations holding that match money?
The larger match money for the
Yeah.
bipartisan infrastructure law.
Yeah, I mean, I think we leveraged quite a few million last year to put monies aside and we saved them and all of that, and I believe that's where it is. I just wanted to make sure that you didn't feel like there was any pressure from anybody on either side. That we're gonna go after any of that money and any of the programs would be in jeopardy.
Correct, not that I've heard.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. So the floods that we had over the summer, did the flood impacts on municipal facilities have any impact on the prioritization of the drinking water, clean water allocations?
So we do that work through our intended use plan, which is sort of outside when the flood occurred. It may affect things going forward. That said, we have worked closely with in particular, the three most flood impacted wastewater facilities, which are Johnson, Hardwick, and Ludlow. to bring additional resources to bear. And that includes, some work with we had a rural infrastructure line item in the ARPA funding that had been previously appropriated by the legislature that we did the criteria and prioritized providing assistance to flood impacted communities. We worked with the treasurer's office under the 10% for Vermont program and the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to create a low interest loan opportunity that communities can use as essentially bridge funding and then pay back once they receive FEMA reimbursement, but it gets them out of a commercial rate loan and into a
Okay,
low interest or in some cases, no interest loan because the League of Cities and Towns has come in and bought down that last point of interest for I think the 15 or 20 most flood impacted communities.
okay, great. So you did help them, but
Correct.
you didn't help them through these allocations. Okay.
Yes,
Okay, good. And so I guess then the intended use plan would still be as it was, like you didn't change priorities.
correct.
Okay,
Correct, and it may influence next year's intended use plan, but we were already sort of through, it's a very public facing.
sure.
And frankly prescribed process. We were already through it at that point. And so look to these other more flexible sources of funding to provide resources to communities in the near term.
Okay, great. And then, I don't know if this is the right time, but I just want to ask a question, please, about long-term plans of utilities. And because in another, and maybe I should ask you to come to economic development or something, but we're making some a lot of housing is tied to sewer and water, obviously. So, but I don't see long-term plans really anywhere in terms of utilities, like an ultimate service area or a planned service area. Is that something that you're contemplating?
We haven't been explicitly, there has been a concerted effort, particularly on the drinking water side of the house, to work with public water supplies to develop asset management plans. Not really expansion plans, but it's maintaining the core infrastructure that already exists. But I am not aware, although I can go back and check with.
It would be helpful, because it's just pretty fundamental to future housing or anything, really.
Yes, yeah, I can get some additional.
That would be great, thank you. And if it makes sense for you to come to the other committee.
Happy to as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So as far as sections line 82 through line 89, does anybody have anything you want to elaborate on, anything different as far as on that secretary committee? Is anything, any questions on any of those lines that we have? Is that all pretty self-explanatory? Okay, on the go.
All right, on to section 10. Section 10 was $6 million set aside in the 24-25 capital bill for recommendation by the Clean Water Board. And there's the breakdown below. As you will recall, this line item generally is in the $10 to $12 million range, but was reduced last year. And I'll walk you through a little bit of explaining how we kind of covered that gap.
Yeah.
But it is we've done it with one-time money, and that won't be available to us again next year. So
We've been made aware of that.
So in looking at all of the sources of clean water funding, there's the Clean Water Fund base, which comes from the property transfer tax, the unclaimed bottle deposits, and 6 points on the rooms and meals tax. We have some one-time monies that we book regularly in the Clean Water Fund. We make our best guess of that base amount and then true it up the following year. And so the Clean Water Fund outperformed our expectations last year, and so that money is being brought in. If you compare it just straight across to the FY24 clean water budget, it would look like a decrease, but that's because we had 3 years where there was a $10 million commitment of ARPA funds to our clean water work. And that is we've used or directed all $30 million that had been provided there. As I noted, the capital bill is $6 million. Generally, we've been in that $10 million range. And so what we are using this year is we had essentially $4 million of unallocated, unreserved revenue in the Clean Water Fund that was sitting on the bottom line. And we're using it to kind of make the budget whole, so to speak.
Yeah.
In addition, we continue to receive through the Lake Champlain Basin Program a fairly robust appropriation that's a legacy of Senator Leahy to continue our work on the Lake Champlain pollution budget. And we are anticipating in FY 25 that will be to the tune of $8 million. I do think it's always important to point out there is work funded through the T-bill to address runoff from state highways, but we don't track that as part of the Clean Water Fund budget. So just, there's language in statute about this ongoing annual commitment in the capital bill, and just we're at the $6 million. I don't need to beat this horse any further other than to say we can't do this again next year. In that we have I think on the order of $300,000 or $400,000 now on our bottom line. So there's not another rabbit we'll be able to pull out of our hat.
Okay.
This just shows the total $10 million and how we're breaking that down between capital bill and the one-time Clean Water Fund monies, just as a point of reference where we've moved the various pieces. Some of this is just based on kind of traditional practice, including that we take the Clean Water State Revolving Fund dollars from the capital bill. And then some of it is just how we balance those accounts and try to minimize the number of these line items taking draws from both the capital bill and the one-time ones.
Yep, go ahead.
This, the Clean Water Revolving Fund, so that includes wastewater, like what we think of as wastewater, and then also stormwater.
Correct.
So, given what we know now, I mean, we knew it before, but now we really know it about flooding. Is floodplain restoration funded there?
It isn't,
Or maybe it could be in the next one? Is it funded anywhere, I guess?
It is funded. Oftentimes it is funded with some of that Clean Water Fund base dollars. Historically, we had done river corridor easements and floodplain restoration projects with capital bill funding, but it have moved away from that, particularly as the Clean Water Fund became more robust and really concentrated the capital bill appropriations into agricultural best management practices, the match for the state revolving fund, infrastructure work on some of our state-owned lands, and then the 2 VHCD accounts.
So river corridor, and what was the other thing?
Floodplain restoration.
Flood, that used to be in the capital plan?
Correct, and that was back prior to I think it was 2019 or FY 19 when we reached agreement on the 6 points on the rooms and meals tax going into the Clean Water Fund. So the budget in the Clean Water Fund base grew really dramatically at that point in time.
And so now it's in the Clean Water Fund, okay, since 2018.
Yeah, I believe FY 19 was when that change occurred. Yep.
How many projects do you think you should kind of go in as far as with all this monies? And then
Hundreds.
we had something that was very helpful to you guys last year, not like all the way helpful, because we still stole $4 million from you, or somebody did. But we had something that was put together, and I don't know if it came from the administration, maybe Kendall or whatever, that showed all the projects that were in each community. Can we have that again?
Yes, so it exists. It's our Clean Water Performance Report. Let me make a note because otherwise I'll.
Because
forget.
that was really
But
helpful for us to go and try to show all the other senators that were gonna be voting on this bill, to show the projects that we had going on in those communities. And it was very helpful to us. The other senators appreciated it. Some had lost their copies and wanted other copies, additional copies, and so, especially with town meeting coming up, that might be something that we might be able to hand out to them as they go back and say, hey, we have this project going on in your community.
Yeah, that would be great, that's a great idea. So then just getting back to stormwater and floodplain, is the department looking at funding floodplain restoration more? Because you know that, I mean, I would think it's evident that we need more floodplain restoration.
Yes, it's a willing buyer, willing seller transaction. It's not a regulatory program. And so it's a combination of sort of right project, right place, right time.
Right.
And I would just offer that the criteria in statute that guide our use of clean water funding are pretty heavily focused on sediment and nutrient pollution.
Mm-hmm.
It may be an area of conversation
That's what I'm
to have in terms of resilience, recognizing we have some obligations to EPA. And the way we've organized this work is focused on fulfilling those obligations. But certainly there have been instances where there are floodplain restoration projects proposed that may not sort of reach the threshold for funding in terms of their ability to reduce sediment and nutrient pollution. And so it's a balance there.
Okay.
We're doing some of that work, but it's being prioritized based on sediment and nutrient pollution.
Right, and that's the whole state, not just the part that's under the jurisdiction, the phosphorus part.
Well, so in that Clean Water Fund base appropriation, there's $5 million set aside for clean water enhancement projects. And I can get the language specific to those for you. It's not limited to sediment and nutrient pollution. It's sort of a overarching, I would describe it as protect the best. But I still don't know that a floodplain restoration project would rank highly necessarily under
Okay.
those criteria, but I can provide those
Okay.
as well.
And that's a policy conversation to go on for years, probably.
Yes,
Thank you.
of course. Oh, and then the last piece is just this proposed technical correction. This is language that's the better part of 20 years old, if not more. That reflects sort of the way collectively state government used to do business, with when BGS managed the capital bill, as opposed to it being managed out of the AOA Secretary's office now. And this language in statute has us working through and receiving approval from the Commissioner of BGS around construction and renovation of projects that cost more than $200,000. And at this point, we really sort of self-manage that work. And rely heavily on the facilities engineering section within the Department of Environmental Conservation, who's sort of our in-house engineering consulting firm. That ensures the work being done at state parks in particular, but also on forest access roads, gets all their necessary permits, and lives up to standards and expectations. And so are seeking this technical correction, just to sort of clean up the record and make clear how we currently do this.
So it's allowing you to do your own work within your department.
Within the agency,
Yeah.
right, it's cross-department because the facilities engineering team sits in DEC.
Well, it's good to specify who's gonna have the plans too, the records. I mean, that's really important.
It is, and it's worked very well for a lot of our needs at state parks to have this in-house team that also builds familiarity with sort of what kinds of projects are needed at state parks, because they're not, they're different than many infrastructure projects in that they're often seasonal.
Cool. Any conversation about that?
That was easy.
We have some more.
Oh, all right.
We're
And we
getting
did-
pounded on this fish hatchery here a little bit.
Yes.
Probably as much, I know as far as me, we're getting, I'm getting as much, correspondence on this as I was S5. So we have a lot of concern in the kingdom and, I don't know, I'm just gonna put it out there, but any more questions?
Yeah, no, I'm just getting emails, a lot of them, hundreds of them. I guess my question is, have we taken a long enough look at this? My understanding is that the hatchery has a permit that will expire in 27. Why don't we just wait till 27 to close it if in fact it can't get the permit at that point? And so I'll let you kind of start with that.
Sure, I would say, I think it's important to know that the reasons for bringing forward this proposal this year are threefold.
One is the likelihood or unlikelihood of being able to obtain a permit when the current permit expires at the end of 27. One is the challenging budget position the Department of Fish and Wildlife finds itself in this year. And third is that we have an opportunity right now to be able to transition the staff at the hatchery into the wildlife division onto federal funds, so that we would be able to make these changes without having to have a reduction in force. And it's unclear that that opportunity would still exist 2 years from now.
So it was because of reclassification, if you will, in terms of positions that this kind of drove that piece of the decision?
We had a class RFR within Fish and Wildlife. There's about 130 employees in the department. 77 of them were part of this reclassification. And it put the better part of $500,000 of upward pressure on the base budget. And that's in addition to all of the pressures I'm sure you're hearing from all agencies of state government in terms of insurance, operating expenses like gasoline and vehicle purchases. Across the board, we saw significant upward pressures and then this RFR on top of that.
So those that were written, are they gonna get federal money though to make up for the difference?
Correct. We're able to move them. Yeah, there are 3 different opportunities where we have federal funds and special funds coming in from different organizations to help provide. So one would be expanded work around small mammals and the supporting our vat biologists, and there's funding through one of the federal funding sources and some money that's earmarked for rare, threatened, and endangered species work that could be used to create a position. There's expanded work, courtesy of some of that Senator Leahy funding around wetland conservation and protection that the department has been championing for us, and to move somebody into helping expand our ability to get those projects done on the ground. And then the third position, I think it's a it's a forester, because it's state lands forester position or technical assistant. And, you know, we have folks in the roles at the hatchery with relevant skills to those 2 of those jobs, and the third one of those jobs is vacant right now. There would be a caretaker that stayed on at the hatchery for the foreseeable future. As you may know, that hatchery is on the Register of Historic Places. And so we have some obligations there to continue the upkeep.
So what would it cost to keep it open for another year? And how would we be able to kind of find the funding for that?
First part of that question, I can't.
You mentioned the better part of $500,000, so I'm taking the 500,000 as a starting point perhaps?
Yeah, if you give me 1 second.
Sure. And is all of that just salaries?
No, some of it's operating as a facility.
What do you mean the ambush of this, by the way?
No, I
It's great that you know.
so the cost to run Salisbury this coming year totals $650,000.
Okay. And some of that salary, some of it's just the operation cost.
Correct, 400 and roughly, I think of it, so 2/3 is salaries, 1/3 is operating costs for the facility.
And if it was closed, they wouldn't have those, is that like heat or?
Yeah, electricity, running wells and aerators, some of the, and there's systems that I don't know if you've been to the
I have
hatchery.
not.
so that there's a series of buildings and raceways, and ultimately the water leaving the hatchery flows into a pond that has some I don't want to say maintenance.
Like there's some work that's done on that water before it actually discharges into the stream.
So all of those pieces are part of those operating
Okay.
costs.
Like they have vacuum, maybe you would call it a vacuum outside, they have vacuums they're using in the raceway. The staff there is, so you may recall in 2019, we also had brought forward a proposal to close the hatchery. There were at that time also concerns about meeting water quality standards. We went back and worked together, Fish and Wildlife and DEC, on a series of best management practices intended to reduce nutrient concentrations coming out of the hatchery. They have worked to a degree, but so far have not worked to the degree where we would have confidence that we're gonna meet water quality standards at the far end of this permit cycle.
And we're more than willing to have you come back in if any of this isn't what you want to, are you prepared to talk about today? Because we understand being prepared. But as a committee, as a chair of this committee, and I'd like to find a way to keep this open, and we're not opposed to opening up the capital bill for funding. I mean, I just, and I know that, oh, we can't do that. Well, we can do whatever we want to do within reason. And I know when CDAC gave us our recommended amount of monies that we could bond for, that was 2 years ago. And I think the state's shown a pretty good path forward as far as doing that. And besides that, why always take the first number when somebody gives you a number anyways? There should always be room for argument and anywhere along the way. So I don't know if the administration is actually going to be, I've talked to the administration about it, and talked to several people within it after they come and wanted to talk to me further about it. But, there's just so much going on here with losing fish population for 3 to 7 years. I think that there's no question that the sports industry in the state of Vermont is taking a beating from the trapping, from the hunting, and now we're going after the fish. And I'm really nervous about what that's going to do as far as for the impact of anybody wanting to come here to recreate for those purposes. So, I'd like to think that we could further a conversation with the administration about this idea. And not just say it's over and settled, and not that you've said that, but of course that's what's been proposed. But any ideas about any of that stuff, or is it something that put you in an uncomfortable position to talk about? Which I understand that.
No, and I would hope it would go without saying, but this isn't a proposal we brought lightly. This is, really thinking about kind of the long-term sustainability of the Department of Fish and Wildlife's budget. And honestly, all three of the components I shared, including this opportunity to shift staff over onto some federal funding streams. The last thing I would like to do as A&R secretaries have to have RIPs on my watch. And so that I held that in very high value that opportunity exists. I think long-term, the other piece of this is a conversation about kind of the economics, long-term sustainability and economics of operating 5 fish hatcheries. These are resource intensive operations and are largely paid for out of state funds. I think there's some real opportunities regarding the Ed Weed fish hatchery that merit investigation. We've had good news, frankly, on the lake trout stocking front and UVM studies showing population rebound. I think it's probably at least in part a reflection of the success of the lamprey control program that Fish and Wildlife and US Fish and Wildlife have engaged in. To the point where there are recommendations to reduce stocking efforts in Lake Champlain. There are biosecurity concerns with taking fish raised in Lake Champlain water and moving them inland. Those are absolutely could be overcome with disinfection and technology. So to the end, to the point that we're right now running the Ed Weed Fish Hatchery not at full capacity and have 5 hatcheries operating in a space where I believe could meet the stocking needs with 4. Would, think it's worth having the conversation about what kinds of investments in Ed Weed could meet the larger objectives you spoke to, Senator Ingalls, about supporting great and high quality angling opportunities in Vermont and making sure we have the fish rearing to do that. And is there a way to meet that goal with fewer facilities and lower operating costs?
As it stands right now, just being honest, one person, one vote. If I stand a chance to get reelected, I cannot support this in any way unless there's a message out there that's better than what it is. And I hate to make it a one issue, but I'm getting so much pressure on this that I just gotta continue on and see if there's a different path. I'm just being fair about that. And it's overwhelming. I have to come out and publicly say I don't support it, but I'm hoping there's another way.
And I've answered all of mine, just saying, I hear ya. Yeah, and I'm gonna try to do everything I can to keep it open. And you know how it is, cafeteria talk, I'll talk about whatever phrase you want to use that, but as people sit around and talk, I understand that there's a certain amount of revenue that's brought in. And I'm hearing $30 million a year, something like that, that may be across all 5. So to me, if you're gonna save, and I'll put save in quotes, 400,000 or 500,000 or whatever it is by closing it, aren't you also going to affect the revenue stream on the other side of that?
Well, so the $30 million, $35 million figure, my understanding is sort of spending by anglers in
Yeah.
in Vermont when they come to fish here. Some of that's license sales, that's direct revenue into the department and the agency, but much of that I think is incidental academic activity,
Yeah.
right? Buying sandwiches, a hotel room,
Yes.
what have you. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one. I think long-term, the trends in terms of hunting and fishing license sales are downward in Vermont, but also nationwide. And that places a lot of challenges on fish and wildlife budgets that historically have sort of grown their own and are able to use license revenue to match federal funds to make the budget whole. And the our Fish and Wildlife Department's no exception. Those trends we're working hard to reverse them. But those are the trends that exist currently. And it requires some hard choices to be made. My belief is that we can do this without a significant impact on angling opportunities. The Roxbury Fish Hatchery was offline for the better part of 10 years following Tropical Storm Irene. We know that had an impact on what we were able to stock out. But I wouldn't say there was a discernible relationship in terms of the impact it had on fishing activity in the state of Vermont. And I do think long-term, fewer facilities with more resources is probably in our collective best interest as a state.
Okay, but you do want to come back, Nan, and talk a little bit more, because I'm still unclear about what the plan is. If we close it, now what? That kind of thing. Are we gonna buy eggs somewhere else, or?
I think that is the proposal, would be to buy eggs somewhere else. And there is now I'm gonna get out over my skis, but I believe that there is a strain of trout that US Fish and Wildlife Service raises at their White River Hatchery that's nearly identical to the strain of the primary strain of trout being raised at Salisbury.
And I can appreciate this wasn't a 100-0 vote or feeling. I understand that there's strong feelings about
Yeah, I mean,
having to do it.
sort of I guess I would say maybe best bad choice,
Yeah.
right? Or least bad choice, knowing that there were no easy decisions to be made in this budget.
Well, I
And
appreciate it.
as I say, I put significant weight on not having to bring forward a proposal that included RIFs.
Yeah.
Which really would be the.
It's just a
other
whammy
option.
to that, all of that, where we're getting, that industry's getting hammered, it just is, it just is, it just is, and you have to say, okay, when's it gonna stop? And sometimes as people that are elected by people from home, we have to dig our heels in, and, this is unfortunately gonna be something that's gonna continue on, it's gonna be more discussion, it's gonna be more talk, and we're gonna try to keep on finding ways to, as you guys are gonna try to switch it to us, we're gonna try to switch it to you. We're gonna try to keep on finding ways to, keep it open. So I think we'll have some more discussions.
Appreciate your comment, though.
Of course.
So, committee, anything else?
No, I just a little, I presume that the federal funds are ongoing funds, not temporary funds.
Correct. So there's, they're called bump funds. We've seen an increase. The federal funds we receive are a result of excise taxes on the sales of hunting and fishing equipment.
Okay.
And we've seen an increase in those funds. It does vary from year to year. But we have several years of that funding backlogged at this point. And our challenge is if we don't start to access those dollars, they could be redirected to other uses in other states.
Oh. And what's the source of those funds? Well,
They're Pittman Robertson funds, but we call them, the department calls them bump funds.
but
And
they're,
I think it's that we get a base appropriation and then depending on base federal appropriation that we're matching with license revenue. And then depending on the sales of hunting and the hunting and fishing gear, if there's additional excise tax generated, we are given an additional allotment. And then we have partners like the Rough Grass Society and this RT&E fund that we're able to use to match those dollars because they're above and beyond what we can match with our license.
okay, great. Thanks. That was a good explanation on the fund.
So, in 2019, I think there was legislation passed that specified water quality reports due for the next couple of years. Is this based on water quality as well, or is it strictly related to a need for funds?
No, it's based on water quality as well. So there are two measures of water quality that we're considering in these small streams. One relates to the concentration of phosphorus, and that's sort of guided by the overall work and commitments we have regarding Lake Champlain. And then one is related to the health of the macroinvertebrate, the bugs that live on the stream bottom. And in this instance, well, I should say the way the standards are structured, if you meet the macroinvertebrate standard, you're presumed to be okay in terms of phosphorus because it's, I think, a small tributary, et cetera. So what happened in 2019 and 2020 was work internally where our Department of Environmental Conservation made a recommendation to Fish and Wildlife for a target phosphorus concentration. If you're trying to meet the in-stream number, it would be impossible, frankly, for this facility, because it's a very low number, it's 12 micrograms per liter.
Huh.
They recommended targeting 40. And so that's, the Fish and Wildlife has worked with a consultant to develop a set of best management practices targeting reducing phosphorus concentrations to 40 micrograms per liter. Our data suggests they're currently hovering around 60. But have gone down from 80 plus. So they've made real measurable progress, but it's still not to where the best professional judgment of the folks in our watershed management program was in terms of what's likely necessary to get the biology back in order. The biology shows some good effects and some bad effects, but still not passive. We have we aggregate, I think, 8 or 9 different biocriteria, and your streams can get a score of poor, fair, good, very good, excellent. And we're smack in the middle of fair, and we need to be good to pass. So the bugs, some would say, are the world's best composite samplers, right? They sit in the stream all day long. They see the full range of effects. Some of that's more, in this case, The stream is what we would call effluent dominated, it's almost all hatchery water. And so like, unlike other places in Vermont where we might have seen some real changes in the bug communities this year as a result of floods or other effects, because the stream is almost all hatchery water, it's pretty consistent, and we haven't seen that strong improving trend that would give us confidence that we're gonna be where we need to be by 2026. So obviously, we're 2 years, or there's 2 more monitoring seasons before that would come to pass. And so I appreciate the uncertainty and sort of holding out hope. I think the challenge on my end is also the uncertainty and the fact that we have these other opportunities currently, and just, I guess, would encourage you, to the extent you're interested in looking at alternatives, to not foreclose an alternative that would see investments in EdWeave that would allow us to take full advantage of the capacity there.
Well, good. Secretary, thank you.
You're
As
welcome.
always, thank you.
My pleasure.
Sorry for the last part, but it's
No,
something
no.
we had to hear and get to. The sections 9 and 10 were very helpful. I don't think there was anything in there confusing, but as we are faced more and more with a complex capital bill, it's very important that we understand the numbers, and I think after today that we do. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And always happy to talk about the hatchery. I know that is a passion of many, and it is, as I said, it was a very hard decision to bring forward that recommendation. It was not something we considered lightly.
Thank you. We are shortening it up a little bit. We are gonna have somebody come in at 2:00. We're gonna be on fish if you wanted to talk about the cash fund. They're not gonna be able to make it, so we're gonna take a break until 2:30, which we're gonna pivot. And we're going to talk about what our last agenda was, which was the first right of refusal on the Williston building, first right of refusal on the public service building that was there. So let's take a break.